Welcome to my DIY farmhouse wreath tutorial based off a wreath that I saw on Instagram that was a dupe of an Anthropologie holiday wreath. The dupe that was made of the Anthropologie wreath was so beautiful and on trend that I actually thought it was the Anthropologie wreath, and I was a little taken aback when I saw that it was not. The real Anthropologie wreath runs about $200 US, and as much as it is beautiful, I really wanted to make my own version of the dupe, which is more of a farmhouse style wreath. So let's get into what I actually got to make my DIY of the Anthropologie dupe. I found the actual wreath itself, which was bare, for only $8.50 Canadian at Michael's. I also ordered bottle brush trees in the exact color that she used off of Amazon for $20. I got 48 pieces in a variety of sizes. And I needed some fake snow, which I found for $5 at Walmart for a can. One can was enough for this project. And then filler pieces like pine cones and other miscellaneous at the dollar store for $1.25 Canadian. So I really lucked out on all of my supplies for this wreath. Unfortunately, we don't have Target in Canada, so I could not access the little wood houses that were used on the dupe Anthropologie wreath. And after doing a lot of online searching, everything was either going to take too long or was too expensive, and I would still have to alter in some way, shape, or form. So I decided to make my own. I should mention that I did find a couple of alternatives in my city at local stores. However, they just weren't quite up to snuff, and I did not want to settle on the look of these little wood houses. So I immediately grabbed a box that we had lying around that sunglasses were delivered in, as well as a Coors Light case, actually, because that's what was on hand. The supplies that I grabbed were an exacto knife. I happened to have a cutting mat from years ago when I was in school for interior decorating, so I grabbed that. Any surface you don't mind getting wrecked would do. Cardboard, pencil, ruler, eraser, some tape, and my hot glue gun and hot glue sticks. So quite simply, I roughly sketched out in pencil where I wanted the windows and the doorways based off of the houses on the wreath that I pulled inspiration from, that were from Target. And then I cut them out with an exacto knife. I was not overly exact with this. It was rough, but obviously I kept things somewhat aligned. I didn't have to worry about being too perfect because I was going to paint around all the windows later and the doorways, but I did obviously use a ruler to try and be as neat as possible. So the one thing I really did take my time on was the dimensions of the houses and making sure that they looked appropriate and balanced and to scale for the wreath and what I wanted to accomplish based off of what the inspiration photo was. I also made two styles of roofs. One style involved 4 separate pieces, and that was used for the 2 rectangular houses that I made out of the sunglass box. The other style of roof was way easier, and it was just 2 rectangular pieces coming to a peak. I also took really thin strips of the cardboard and I glued it to the inside of the windows inside that little houses to look like actual window mullions or stiles. This is what was in the houses on the inspiration wreath, and I loved it. It added so much dimension to those little houses, made them look a little more realistic and give them some character, so I had to make that part of this process. The inside of your houses is going to look like a hot mess, but no one will ever know once they're on your wreath, so take comfort in that. Once I started creating the house with the Coors Light box, I realized that when I looked through the windows of the houses, I could see that patterning on the inside. So as a quick fix, I just took a piece of the cardboard and the craft brown colored side, I actually just glued to the inside of the house so that once they were nestled into the branches of my wreath, you could only see that craft brown color on the inside. It actually doubled as extra stability, so I wasn't too upset about it. Along the way, I did test out how the scale of my houses was looking on my actual wreath. So originally I had made 5 and then ended up adding a 6th to the wreath. I realized that I really needed it for balance, regardless of adding trees in after the fact. But as you can see, I've got 2 of each style here, although they each have just slight variations to them, which I really liked. Any white craft paint would do. And once they were dry, which took no time at all, I actually set them on their respective little houses so I could make sure that they fit. Obviously, as I was making them, I had to do this as well, but this was just a final shot of me testing the roofs on the houses. They look a little bit wonky, but that's okay because we are going to end up gluing them down, and at that point they'll stay in place. But they were looking pretty good so far. I was really happy with it. So the next step was actually going in and adding paint and hot glue embellishment to the houses. I already painted my roofs white, as I mentioned, so I actually used the same white paint and went in and roughly outlined all of the windows and doorways, and I painted the window mullions as well in the same white. On 2 of the houses that had peaked roofs, I actually added little scallop detailing, just rough by hand, because that was what was in the original inspiration wreath photos, and I really liked the look of it. It just mixed it up a little bit. And for the roofs, I really focused on the peaks and any of the edges and corners where snow would naturally gather. After adding the hot glue, you can go in and actually glob on, and I say glob, I mean roughly glob on the white paint you used for the other embellishments on top of the hot glue once it's dry. This just made it so that if there was any missing faux snow when it fell on the houses or the roofs, you had a white coat underneath. Faux snow. So this was the fun part. Messy but fun. I took all of my roof pieces that were now painted and had dried hot glue on them, and I laid them on just a cardboard box outside. These roofs I wanted to be completely fully covered in faux snow, so I did not have to be careful with these and try and avoid any areas. I just went for it. So I sprayed that faux snow at every angle that I could. Next was spraying the houses themselves, and this was a little more tedious because I didn't want them to be fully covered. So I held them at as far of a distance from myself as possible, and then I took the faux snow and I would spray from the bottom of the houses up, from the back bottom corners up at the sides, and then really, really, really lightly mist from the very, very, very top down. Just a one shot of that at the end. I really did not want these to be fully covered in snow. I wanted you to see the details. I wanted you to see the craft brown showing through, but I did want them to have a dusting. Since the roofs were going to be fully covered, the house would inevitably naturally have snow on it as well. So that's the look that I wanted. After I sprayed them, I let them sit for quite a while, and when I brought them in, I did take a small dry paintbrush and I went in and I just kind of perfected the look of the front of the houses. I brushed off some of the excess snow that maybe sprayed on too much, it went too heavy, and I just made it look exactly how I wanted it, and I love the way that they turned out. They look like freshly dusted with snow gingerbread houses. This is the final look of my snow-dusted houses without their roofs on. I think they turned out so cute, and I was really, really excited at this point to construct everything. So the next step was actually getting to attach my roofs, which was really exciting. Again, the inside of your houses are not going to be pretty, but no one will ever know. So I flipped them over, held the roofs on, and glued them in place from underneath and inside the houses. I didn't want the glue showing on the outside, so I really focused on only applying it inside of the house. I applied in every single crack and gap that I could find, and then actually went over it again just to be sure that everything was sticking properly, and then obviously let it all of the hot glue dry and sit until the next day just to make sure that everything was secure. And here is the final product of my houses with their roofs attached and their snow, and they just look so cute. I was in love and am in love with these little houses and how they turned out, considering they are all from repurposed cardboard that I had lying around my house. I just think they turned out like this little magical gingerbread village, and I'm so proud of them. They're not perfect, they look handmade, and they're the exact kind of farmhouse vibe that I was going for. Next thing you need to do is spray the actual wreath itself with the faux snow. It doesn't matter whether you do this before or after the houses. The order makes no difference, but I did mine after, and I just took my plain wreath that I got at Michael's and set it outside, completely sprayed it down with the faux snow all over the front. And it's important to remember to pick it up and do the back side as well, and the sides of the wreath and any nooks and crannies between branches, just in case you're going to see it from several angles when it's hanging. You want it to look really cohesive. Next, you can get into actually assembling your wreath with all of the supplies you collected, your filler pieces, your trees, and the houses that you made. So you want to take your wire as well, and you're going to use that for attaching your bottle brush trees. And you're going to need your hot glue gun and glue sticks for assembling all of the filler pieces onto the wreath. As I mentioned before, along the way I was sorting out my layout with the houses, and I had 6 houses total, and this wreath is a 24-inch wreath, so I needed to figure out where I wanted my houses and then use the filler pieces and the trees to fill in all of the gaps. So once I had my layout nailed down, I glued my houses onto the wreath. I applied the hot glue to the back edges of the houses, and then I nestled them into the branches, making sure that they were nice and stuck to my wreath in the spots where I wanted them. From there, I was able to wrap the wire around the base of my bottle brush trees and attach them to the branches to keep them in place while I worked on the rest of the wreath. I added in all of my filler pieces with hot glue, and then I was able to hold my wreath up vertically so that I could see if anything was out of place, everything was looking right, if anything was falling forward, and make adjustments and tweak from there. After I assembled all of my pieces onto my wreath, unfortunately, a lot of my faux snow had fallen away at that point, which was a downfall of spraying the wreath first, but it was necessary so that there was snow behind all of the pieces. So what I did was I actually took my wreath outside and I covered my houses with paper towel, and I took my faux snow and I gave my wreath a complete once over with the faux snow spray. This way, with the paper towel covering the houses, I didn't add extra snow to that part of the wreath. I was able to keep those exactly how I wanted them, but the roofs and the trees and the branches of the wreath all received an extra coating of faux snow. My final step, after some convincing and suggestions from family and friends, was adding string lights to my wreath. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this, but in the end I decided that I wanted to be able to enjoy it at night as well, and I went in and just added a single strand of tiny string lights and made sure that one light was in each house as I went around my wreath. The string lights were not part of the original Anthropologie dupe that I fell in love with, but I really like that they added a magical quality to the wreath, especially at night. And here's the final wreath, both in the day and at night with the lights on, and I am so happy with how it turned out. I love my little DIY houses that I made from recycled material, and the whole thing just comes off very farmhouse, cozy, a little whimsical, especially with the lights, and I'm so proud of it. The only thing I would change on this wreath process is the faux snow. If I had my way, I would use more of a permanent solution because I know that this faux snow is going to come off when I put this wreath into storage and bring it back out, and I'm constantly going to be adding the snow to it because I like the look of it with the snow on the wreath, and I actually feel there isn't quite enough at the moment. So what I'm going to do is test a process of using some sort of textured white spray paint for a more permanent solution, and I will post an update about that in a separate video and let you know how it goes. I couldn't wait to share this process and wreath with everyone, and I do have my blog post on it as well, which I will link in the description. But if you are inspired by this or you just love what I created, please leave a comment below, as well as if you have any questions. And I hope that all of you have the happiest of holidays and a happy new year. Thanks for watching.